Continuing here with our predictions in the NFC, it is now time to go to the NFC East. And I think one storyline right off the bat that stands out to me about this NFC East was that last year, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say this here, the NFC East could have been the worst division in the history of football. It ended up that the Washington football team won the division with only a record of 7-9. And the first question I have off the bat here is that even though the NFC East last year was so bad, when you look at these four teams, I think each one of them has legit reason for optimism and reason to have somewhat high expectations. Obviously, Washington wins the division last year. They returned a majority of that team. A lot of good young players on the defensive side of the ball. They should expect to win the division and return to the playoffs. I think that without doubt, without hesitation, the most talented roster in this division goes to the Dallas Cowboys. But if you've watched the game of football, you know that it isn't always talent that ends up winning these games. It's the team that executes the best and knows not how to screw up and turn the ball over. Dallas, they should have expectations to win the division. The New York Football Giants, this is a team that even though they only won 6 games last year, I was actually impressed with what I saw from Joe Judge and the way this team is built, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But they have concerns with the offensive line and some quarterback issues that we could get into later. And also the Philadelphia Eagles, who Jalen Hurts will enter the season, his first season as the Eagles starting quarterback, his first season under center. The Eagles kind of feel to me like a little bit of a team in transition, but at the same time, they still have a lot of guys who were members of that team only a couple years ago that ended up winning the Super Bowl. So I think all four teams have some intriguing storylines. Without further ado, let's get right into it. My prediction to win the NFC East is going to be, for the first time in a long time, I believe it's been 10 or so years, that a team in the NFC East has won back-to-back division titles. And for me, the team that I'm calling to do it this season is the Washington football team. I am super high on Washington going into this season. And I think it's crazy because a lot of people feel the same way that I do, right? When you look at this Washington football team, we're picking them to win the NFC East after they won it last year. And it's crazy because only last year, it felt like we were in this consistent trajectory of Washington just being the worst run organization in football. We all know what Daniel Snyder's history as an owner contains of. But at the same time, he really tried his best last year to clean the culture, to clean up the image of Washington by changing their name. Obviously dealing with everything that went down with the sexual assaults, allegations, and everything that was going down there. He obviously got rid of the executive that really things really didn't work out there under Bruce Allen, and he got rid of him. Bruce Allen was the Washington GM for a while, and he stayed there way too long. Things were obviously getting very toxic there. Bruce Allen was let go. I think that was a big key, and they decided to bring in a young GM by the name of Martin Mayhew, and I've been really impressed with the moves that he has been able to make so far. I think that the Washington football team defense has a chance to be the best defense in the NFL this season. I look at this unit and I see dogs. I think Chase Young is a guy that in 2 or 3 years, he is going to be the obvious pick and the obvious answer for who the best defensive player in football is. And I know Aaron Donald still exists and he's playing at a height that not a lot of other people could match. But in 4 or 5 years when his game just starts declining a bit, I think Chase Young could get on that level. Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat. That makes up one of the best front fours in all of football. That is a group that is just going to do whatever they can to get to the quarterback. I also like Matt Ioannidis as a rotational defensive lineman in there as well. They draft Jamin Davis, young linebacker that I think could be really really good. They have Cam Krull, who is just a flat-out playmaker in that secondary. Landon Collins, they figure out corner as well, bringing in William Jackson. They have Kendall Fuller, returnee. I love this Washington football team defense. I totally understand, though. The number one question for concern for this Washington team is quarterback. Ryan Fitzpatrick has never made the playoffs in his career. However, I do think that this is going to be the best defense he has played with throughout his career. I think the weapons around him, two guys, Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, I think those two guys are stars, man. I think those two guys could be one of the better running back receiver duo in the NFL, and they are guys that could make their quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick better. Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, like those guys provide just a consistent running game that if Fitzpatrick ever has trouble with, he could do a good job there, help them out. Their offensive line is getting better with Brandon Scherff, and they draft Samuel Cosme, a young prospect from Texas that I've really liked. And even if Fitzpatrick doesn't play great, I was actually really impressed with this kid, Taylor Heinicke. I get it. It was one game. But if there was any team that you ask yourself, who gave the defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers the biggest matchup issue? Who gave them the best fight? You could argue that the answer to that question was the Washington football team under the lead of Taylor Heinicke. I think they signed him for a reason. I think if Fitzpatrick doesn't work out, Heinicke could actually be a pretty good starting quarterback in this league. I have Washington winning the division with a record of 10-7. Their over-under is 8.5. I'll take them to go over, and Washington is actually plus 200 to win the NFC East. The favorite in Vegas to win the NFC East is the Dallas Cowboys right now with odds of plus 110. Their over-under right now will stand at 9.5, and I am going to take the under there. I'm going to take the Cowboys to finish with a record of 8-9. Why is that? The first two words that come to mind for me, Mike McCarthy. There is no doubt the Cowboys have one of the more talented rosters in the NFL, and obviously after the devastating injury to Dak Prescott last season, having number 4 back under center is going to be a huge key for this Dallas Cowboys team. I totally understand that. But here's what a lot of people don't realize. Last year, the Dallas Cowboys, throughout the first 4 or 5 games of the season, before Dak Prescott got hurt, offense wasn't their problem. I give Dak credit. He got off to the best start of his career last year, and that offense was humming. But what was the problem? It was that still, with that offense being great, their defense wasn't good enough. As good as that offense was, they still couldn't win games because their defense was just that bad. And even with a new defensive coordinator, they finally get rid of Mike Nolan and bring in Dan Quinn. I don't think that difference is going to be good enough for this Dallas Cowboy team to win the NFC East. And they have plenty of talent. I think Micah Parsons is going to be a really good player. One of the few rookies that I think is going to be ready to come in right away and make a significant impact as a linebacker. Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, Randy Gregory. There's plenty of talent on this defensive side of the football for the Cowboys. My issue is I just don't trust their coaching. Dan Quinn, we saw what the Atlanta Falcons looked like after Kyle Shanahan left, after the 2016 season, and after that 28-3 Super Bowl debacle. And here was my issue with that Falcon team, right? You could have expected their offense to take a little bit of a step back, considering the fact that Kyle Shanahan is an offensive mastermind. He's a genius. He clearly makes quarterbacks better with that system. The issue is, why did the defense just kept on getting worse and worse when that's Dan Quinn's baby? Dan Quinn was able to coach a Super Bowl winning defense in Seattle. Obviously, when you compare Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright to really any other defense in the league, that's going to be hard to do, but I just would have wanted the Falcons defense to be a little bit better over the past 2 years, and they really didn't show any signs of life. They didn't really have a pulse, and when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, given their history, given their expectations, I've just seen this movie way too many times before. I think their offensive line, especially without Zach Martin, he's going to be out for the first Thursday night football game of the season on NBC against Tampa Bay. I think with him being out, Dallas's offensive line really isn't anything special. Like La'el Collins, Tyron Smith, at this point in their career, I just don't know if they're the same player that they once were, especially Tyron Smith at his peak, at his heyday. He is obviously a Hall of Fame type talent, but at the same time, could you trust him to be your rock and your number one anchor without Zach Martin against what is going to be a really good Tampa Bay Buccaneer pass rush? I just don't trust this Cowboy team. I think they have enough talent to win 8 games. And one more comment, Mike McCarthy, he's the biggest con man in the NFL. He's gotten very lucky throughout his career to be around some elite talent, whether it's Aaron Rodgers and that Packer team, which they just lost so many frustrating playoff games. I mean, the fact that Mike McCarthy kicked, 2-3 field goals from the 1-2 yard line in that game against Seattle, if I'm a Packer fan, to be honest with you, I'm still absolutely livid about that lost NFC Championship game. That was on Mike McCarthy. They didn't come ready to play against the Atlanta Falcons in that other NFC Championship game. The loss to Arizona. Like, Aaron Rodgers got Mike McCarthy out of there for a reason. He talks during the season, he took off about being Mr. Analytic. He said he watched every single snap of the 2019 season and evaluated it based on analytics, like something like that. And he basically, in his introductory press conference, then lies about it, or said he lied about it and said, I was just really making all that up. I just wanted to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I think Mike McCarthy is a disaster waiting to happen. I don't trust him as the head coach of Dallas, given his history. I have the Cowboys finishing in second with a record of 8-9. Finishing in third with a record of 6-11 for me is going to be the New York Giants. And when it comes to Joe Judge, it's weird because last year at this time, I was super, super skeptical. I said, wow, watching a Bill Belichick guy, we know the history of how those kind of guys have done in the NFL over the last couple of years, plus this Bush League high school mentality of making his players run laps after they mess up. Like, this is the NFL. Players could run a million wind sprints if they have to. I think if you want to take accountability and gain some respect, take a player off the field if he's not performing. It's that simple. But the New York Giants, this is a team that I think has one of the more underrated defenses in the league. I think last year there were many times where the New York Giants defense put the team on the back. I think James Bradbury is one of the 5 best corners in the NFL. Blake Martinez, a really good tackling linebacker. Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence have a good ability to get to the quarterback. But then you look at the offensive side of the ball, and I think it's interesting because from afar, you look at the offense for the Giants, and you should say there's no reason to think it shouldn't be better based on what we're going to see this year from Saquon Barkley being healthy. Another year in the offensive system for quarterback Daniel Jones to learn. And you have Andrew Thomas, a second-year left tackle. You bring in Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney, the young receiver from Florida. Like, there are many reasons to think that this Giants offense should be significantly improved. My issue is 2 things. 1, the offensive line. It looks like right now Andrew Thomas is turning out to be a bad pick. And it's only been 1 year. We'll see if he could recover. But I'm seeing some other offensive tackles from that draft, including Tristan Wirfs and Jedrick Wills and Mekhi Becton. Like, those guys are looking pretty good. And after only 1 season, I get it, only 1 season, Andrew Thomas was very disappointing last year, especially to start. I liked Will Hernandez as a right guard coming out of college. That pick hasn't looked great for Dave Gettleman. And it's weird because Dave Gettleman gets a lot of hate. I get it. He's a guy who refuses to trade up. He's a goofy-looking guy. I think he's an easy guy to target just based on appearance. But I don't think he's done a terrible job. Like, he's made some okay moves, bringing in Leonard Williams, bringing in Logan Ryan, Jabril Peppers, James Bradbury. Like, I think the Giants won the Odell Beckham Jr. trade right now. They got a much more better assets back than what a lot of other teams could have, and they have taken advantage. Like, I think Dexter Lawrence is a really good player. I think Jabril Peppers is a really good player. But the 2 moves for Dave Gettleman that have really rubbed me the wrong way is Daniel Jones, taking him. I've just never watched this guy and saw a top 10 quarterback with top 10 talent. If you are taking a quarterback in the top 10, you have to be willing to live or die by his performance. And that is why I think this season is so big for Dave Gettleman and Daniel Jones and the New York Giants, because now there are no excuses. Last year, we looked at the weapons around Daniel Jones, especially without Saquon Barkley, and said, even some of the better quarterbacks in the league couldn't succeed with this group of skill position players around. But now, there are no more excuses. Bringing in Galladay, bringing in Tony, and bringing in back a healthy Saquon Barkley. It's a big year for the Giants. All of the pressure in the world is on Daniel Jones, and I just don't believe in this guy. He turns the ball over way too much for me. I think there becomes a point where even after you have a young quarterback who's only been in the league for about 3 years after this year, that will be the situation for Daniel Jones, you just have to sometimes admit that you messed up. And if the Giants really wanted to get crazy and take Justin Fields in this draft like the Chicago Bears did, they easily could have. And I think right now, if you ask me, who would you rather have on your football team as your starting quarterback, Justin Fields or Daniel Jones? The answer for me would be Justin Fields. I would be willing to roll the dice without seeing Fields take a real NFL in-game snap yet. That is how low I am on Daniel Jones. Once again, I think you've seen some flashes, but the turnovers and the inability to read the pocket and the offensive line just being not good, I am not too high on the New York Giants. I have them finishing in third with a record of 6-11. And finishing in last place for me is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles with a record of 4-13. By the way, for the New York Giants, their over-under win total was, let me just get this here. The Giants over-under win total was 7. I will take the slight under there. I think they get 6. Finishing in fourth for me is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles, and I understand a lot of Eagle fans are going to look at the fact that I have Philadelphia finishing in last, and you're going to say, Zach, why do you hate the Philadelphia Eagles so much? This is a team that has some talent, and I agree. I actually think the Eagles are going to be better and more competitive than a lot of people expect. I think they're going to be similar to what the New York Giants and the Carolina Panthers were last season, a team that wins 5-6 games but is really competitive. And because they're so young, especially at some core positions, they're going to struggle to close out and win some games. I do think Jalen Hurts is much better than I would have ever expected him to be. Coming out of college, I didn't necessarily know if this guy was going to be able to make all of the NFL level throws. And he was drafted in the second round. I didn't like the pick at all because I said, the Eagles, what are you doing messing with Carson Wentz and his confidence? It turns out Wentz, his attitude was so bad they had to ship him out of town. But this is Jalen Hurts' job now. They bring in Gardner Minshew. Maybe they go to him before the time the season wraps up. But still, Jalen Hurts is the quarterback. And I think he has some weapons around him. Like, Miles Sanders is a really good running back. That's a guy that could play on my team any day of the week. Devontae Smith obviously won the Heisman last year. He's a baller. Jalen Reagor has been making some highlight-level catches in practice over the last couple of weeks. Quez Watkins is a player. Like, they have some good guys on this offense. And even on defense, and the offensive line, like, they still have some holdovers from that Super Bowl team a couple of years ago between Jason Kelsey and Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson. I'm actually a big fan of this kid, Jordan Mailata, a left tackle that stepped up and did some big things for Philadelphia last year. The defense still has some holes, but at the same time, they still have some dudes obviously that carried over from that Super Bowl team, like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett. Darius Slay is an impact player on the defensive side of the ball as well. A player I really like from their team is Kayvon Wallace, young safety. He made some impact plays last year from Clemson. I think Philadelphia, even though I'm only predicting them to win 4 games, I think they're going to be better than people expect. I think they're going to be more competitive than people expect. It's just Jeff Lurie, an owner that has been a really good owner over the last couple of years. I consider Philadelphia to be one of the more well-run teams in the NFL. I just feel like every year they find themselves in the playoffs one way or the other, even if they win the big game or not. And I think their front office knows what they're doing. I do think that whether Jalen Hurts is the quarterback of the future or not, they said they're in transition. I think it's going to be an in-transition kind of season. It's just when your owner says that, I have a hard time taking you to win football games. But I do think they're going to be competitive. I do think they're going to be in a lot of games. A concern for me about the Eagles is their head coach. Nick Sirianni, he hasn't coached a game yet, so it's hard to judge him. But every time this coach opens his mouth at the podium, and I'm big on that, I really want your coach to be, look like a leader and look capable and know what he's talking about during those press conferences. And Nick Sirianni hasn't really been able to do that yet. I don't think he's really been able to take the force out of the room and deliver it with his own hands. But at the same time, as a football coach, you just never know. I've heard some good things about him in terms of everything that's been going on the field. So that's the NFC East. I think Philadelphia is a fascinating team. I think they're talented with some holdover guys from those past Super Bowl teams, as well as a nice combination of young talent with Hurts and Rager and Devontae Smith and Quez Watkins. We'll see what ends up going down there in Philly. To recap my NFC East predictions, I will have the Washington football team winning the division with a record of 10-7. In second, I will take Dallas with a record of 8-9. Giants in third at 6-11. Eagles in fourth with a record of 4-13. That is the NFC East.